Athletes in contact and non-contact sporting codes in the country will be allowed to train under the Level 3 lockdown, and non-contact sport bodies also are permitted to host events without spectators. This was revealed by the Minister of Sports and Arts and Culture, Nathi Mthethwa, who said sport bodies will have to seek permission before doing so. Mthethwa also said the sport bodies will have to follow strict protocols, including sanitizing places they train in before they resume training to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
A number of sporting codes internationally have shed light on when they will restart following suspensions due to COVID-19. Germany's Bundesliga has already resumed playing, with England's EPL and Spain's La Liga already training and having announced when they will resume. And on the domestic front, it was unclear when some sporting codes will be allowed to restart after government announced the country would be moving to alert level 3 on the 1st of June. Now the Minister of Sport has shed light on the matter, announcing that both non-contact and contact sport will be permitted to train from Monday, but under stringent conditions.
Non-contact sport, it's both training and resumption and of playing. But from contact sport, it's only at the training level.
However, all sport bodies must, within 14 days after the publication of the directions, inform the minister in writing as to the date of resumption and further provide an operational guideline.
These are draft directions. And even if they've been gazetted, it's not automatic that you are going to wake up in the morning and go and train. You still have to write and make your case before the ministers.
But for contact sport like soccer and rugby, training will only be for purposes of preparing to return to competitive action, as they will only be allowed to compete under alert level 1.
Level 3, we are dealing with training and preparations, and then in all probability, depending on the behavior of the virus and the people, at this stage it's envisaged that contact sport is possible to be at level 1.
The non-contact professional sport like tennis, athletics, cricket and golf would have welcomed the minister's announcement. Unfortunately for amateur golf, which is big in the country, it must have been a bitter pill to swallow after the ministry said amateur sport will have to continue adhering to general regulations. It remains to be seen how non-contact sport competitions will be conducted, with athletes from areas designated as hotspots not to be allowed to travel to other areas. Pesing Katlo, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Thank you there, Pes. Now joining me to try and unpack what the sports minister spoke about earlier is Njabulo Ngiti, New Frame Sports editor, Mark Stradom, who's a freelance reporter, as well as Manfred Seiler, independent media practitioner. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Mark, let me start with you. You sat through the minister's briefing today. What do you make of some of the decisions? Non-contact, contact sports, but you can't really play whether you go and train or not. Speak to us. What did you take out of that?
Hi, Teresa. Yeah, thanks. It's from Times Live as well, but don't worry about it. It's fine. Teresa, I mean, yeah, I think there's some promise for professional sports, absolutely, and of course for non-contact sports, which can resume events, and a lot of promise, I think, for contact sports, that they can resume training. I think the clause that jumped out to me was the clause that all training remains prohibited and non-contact sports remain prohibited in hotspot areas. And look, every one of our professional teams just about in the country, rugby, cricket and football and the major sports, and a lot of the athletes, a lot of the golfers, they pretty much all live in urbanized area or are based in urbanized areas that are hotspots. So that was a clause that jumped out to me that I think might be, rugby and football are welcoming the return to training, and but I think then later the DG of Transport, Alec Moemi, later today did say, he dropped a hint that it might be permissible for athletes to move to non-hotspots.
Yes.
Which might see professional teams, it might be football, it might be rugby, it might be cricket, moving out of the cities to find places to train. if that's permissible. And I do think that even could work out as something which could be a good thing overall, because it gets these teams out of the hotspots and out to places where the numbers are very low.
Yeah.
And it could be a safer way to do it. I think there's a lot of details that are still going to come out in the next few days. And I suspect that rugby and football might have, we know they're constantly in contact with the ministry and might have negotiated a way forward for their training. But I think if there's a way around that hotspot for the major sports, they'll be delighted to get back to even fitness training, because fitness training is the precursor to when you can work on your contact training, and that's a precursor to it lays the ground for a possible return to sport, possibly in the I heard someone say they're level 1. Possibly it could even happen at level 2, but I would imagine in the next 6 weeks to 2 months we might even see contact and non-contact sports behind closed doors.
Yeah, Mark, let me bring in Jabula. And Jabula, interesting what Mark has just said with regards to possibly traveling to certain areas to play. I know football has been wanting to go back to play. We know that in the Bundesliga in Europe already football is being played. I know in certain parts of Asia, their football is being played. What do you make of it? Football has been, South Africans are crying to have their soccer back on air.
I think it's a bit early to, I understand the frustration of wanting football to be back. As someone who watches the sport and covers it, it's something that I'd like to be back as soon as possible, but I don't think we're at that level yet, because all the countries that are returning to playing football or are on their way have gotten the worst of this COVID-19. They've sort of had the worst hit, and we're still gradually getting there. So I think for me, the issue is that, we haven't gotten to a period where it's at its worst, and I think we need to get over that phase first before we can think about football, because if sports comes back, there's a lot of movement and there are a lot of people involved, because even though on paper it seems like it's just a few people behind closed doors, but when they go back to training, when they move around, it's in, for instance, in Cape Town, and they have to play in Toyando. Imagine how many interactions and how many people that they have to come across to get there. So I think for me, it's still a bit early to get back to football when you look at the spread of this virus, and I think we need to put people's lives first before we think about money.
Speaking about money, Manfred Seidler, let me bring you in here. In particular with the sporting fraternity, we've spoken about how COVID-19 has seen people lose their jobs all around. The sport fraternity has been hit hard and hit very hard, not only for players who are not getting wages, whether it's weekly, monthly, or however they get them. Yourselves, media practitioners out there, you are suffering the same. Well, it's hard for you guys too, isn't it?
Well, effectively since middle of March, I've had zero income, and I think that's the case with all independent media personnel, if you would. Just quickly getting back to the football, though, what is very interesting, the Bundesliga had a consultations company, and they had 10 different scenarios before they actually opened up to playing behind closed doors. So the Bundesliga went to the government with 10 different scenarios, and between the two of them, they worked out what would work the best. I don't know what the PSL is doing or what South African Rugby is doing, Mark, and Jabula will be able to explain it a lot better. But that's the level that they're working at. But to get back to your question in terms of the finances, there's a knock-on effect because everybody gets hit. The athletes can't compete. We have no events to cover. And therefore we don't earn an income. The athletes don't earn an income. So it's pretty bleak out there.
Malcolm, let me bring in just a quick wrap. We run out of time, guys. I've been told we've got literally a minute, but I'm going to try and squeeze 45 seconds, maybe 15 seconds out of all you guys. Best case or worst case scenario, Mark, let me bring in first with regards to sport. And Jabula spoke about a couple of weeks' time. I know you're also estimating a couple of weeks' time. What would you like to see, in particular with the contrast of having professional as well as amateur sports? Who's struggling the most? Who should get the first bite at the cherry and go back playing?
Well, the first bite, I'm not sure. I would imagine a lot of the athletes who aren't as well, or who haven't got a paycheck. The athletes generally are reliant on competing in athletics. I would hope they and those kind of, and would probably get the first bite. Just very quickly, I think one thing advantage we've got is that we have seen what, like Manfred said, has been done overseas in the Bundesliga, and we've got the examples there to follow, and those steps to follow, and that's where we're quite lucky.
Jabula, over to you. Quick one, and as far a quick outro from yourself, what do you think looking ahead as we go down gradually on the levels?
I think we really need to, I mean, it's hard, obviously, because money is quite important and it's the livelihood of everyone. I think we really have to put a priority on people's lives. I mean, even though this is a business, but it's also a pastime to some extent. And I think our people's lives should be the driving force, not necessarily how much money has been lost and what needs to be recouped.
Jabula, thank you very much for speaking to me. Manfred, I would give you a pass, but unfortunately we're told that's all time for we have for tonight. We'll touch base on the other side hopefully when sports are open. Gentlemen, thank you very much for speaking to us right on SA today. And unfortunately we've run out of time and we've got to call time in our program tonight. Thank you very much for the team right here at Nasrec. Take a quick break, a couple of minutes time. There's more news for you at the top of the hour, 1800 hours Central African time. We'll have the full view on you. For myself and the team Nasrec, bye-bye.
There's one thing that we have learned from COVID-19.